Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. Today's video, I'm doing a deep dive on a band called Electric Light Orchestra, or is known as ELO. It's a band I just recently, kind of in the last year or so, got into, and I've listened to all their albums, and done some research on them. So this is my first in the series called my deep dives, where I go through a band or an artist and go through all their discography, and then do a video talking about the band, and then also doing a top 10 list. So stay tuned to hear my thoughts here on Jason the Old Millennial. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well here on Friday evening. I'm starting this series I'm calling it Deep Dives. And this is a deep dive into a band or an artist where I listen to all of their albums, basically chronologically from beginning to end. And as I'm listening to their albums, I'm also writing down my favorite songs from each album. So I'm compiling like my favorite songs list, and then breaking that down to my top 10 favorite songs of that band or artist. Anyway, this is something I've been really wanting to do, to really get into bands more. And there's a lot of bands where I've maybe heard an album or two from them, but I really haven't gone through everything to really feel, get the whole immersion of that band and really see what they're about. And also I want to see if there's some, hidden gem songs that I haven't heard before, because those are always fun when you get to a song that you're like, wow, this is an amazing song, I never heard of it. And it's fun to go through a band I'm not familiar with and kind of discover them for the first time. That's kind of one of the reasons why I want to do kind of a series like this, where I go through all these different great bands and groups that I'm just not as knowledgeable about. Anyway, so this is my first one doing it. I'm doing it on the band Electric Light Orchestra, or known as ELO. I did a poll some months ago, and I had like 4 different groups on. That was like, I want to do a deep dive on one of these groups, and I put the poll up, and ELO won the poll. So there definitely must be a fandom out there, at least from the people that listen to or watch my channel. Must be a lot of fans of ELO, because that won the poll. So I was like, okay, good, because that was one of the bands I really wanted to get into. ELO is a band that I really didn't hear until they got inducted to the Hall of Fame. Like, I really never heard of the band, didn't know them, even though I now know I've heard some of their big hit songs on the radio growing up, but I don't know why I just never knew Electric Light Orchestra was the band behind the songs. So I remember seeing like they had the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017 when they're inducted, and I was like, who is this band, Electric Light Orchestra? They're a Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so they must be good, I guess, but I didn't know anything. Jeff Lynne's a name I've heard. Like, I feel like I've heard people talk about Jeff Lynne, especially associated with George Harrison. And so I kind of knew, okay, I know there's a guy named Jeff Lynne, but I don't know anything about him. But I'm like, okay, so he's the lead singer and whatnot of this band. And I remember when they inducted them, there was almost this talk of like, I want to say like George Harrison or Paul McCartney or someone said like Electric Light Orchestra was like the next Beatles or something like that. Like, they gave them a really high praise. Like, this was a band, like the Beatles kept going on, they would sound like the Electric Light Orchestra or something like that. So I'm gonna go, wow, they're like the Beatles. I love the Beatles. So I was like, makes me think like, man, this must be a good group. But then I always thought, why haven't I never heard of this group? I don't know. They're obviously have done very well. They've been in the Hall of Fame. They've been around. They've sold a lot of albums, had a lot of hits. Yeah, it's not a band I hear people talk about that much, or that I've personally have heard their songs on radio and go, oh, that's Electric Light Orchestra, I love that band. I don't know. So it seems like they're almost this under the radar band to me. So that was my relationship. And then about a year or so ago, when I was trying to compile my top 100 favorite albums list, I needed to listen to more albums to make up that list. So I was trying to research and go, okay, what are big albums I haven't heard yet that I need to listen to that might be good, that I might need to put on my list? And I remember coming across Electric Light Orchestra, and everybody was saying a whole new record, a new world record. I always get that wrong. A new world record was like their best album or something like that, or considered one of their best. And so I checked it out on Spotify, and I absolutely loved the album. And I was like, yeah, this is a great album. So that album made my top 100 favorite albums list, though I didn't delve into any of their other albums, only because I had so many different artists I was trying to get to their big albums that I only kind of listened to a couple albums of every big artist just because I had so many to go through. I wanted to get my list together, so I didn't have enough time to really delve deeply into ELO. So it was great that a couple months ago, I started this basically going through their discography, and I'm really happy I got to go through everything and get to listen to all their albums. And it's been a real blast getting to know the band kind of, and really becoming a fan of theirs as well. As being, one of the top bands of this 70s era, 80s era. Anyway, so doing the deep dive. Also, I'm going to do a top 10 favorite ELO songs tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's going to be a live stream, and I have 3 guests that are going to be on tomorrow, being Adam from What the Gym, Briar from Briar's Music Showcase, and Garrett from Sound Lab Studio. And Garrett especially is a huge ELO fan. He keeps telling me I need to listen to them. And when I first met him, he talked a lot about how he really praised ELO and how great they are. Adam as well, I know, had some ELO albums, and he talked highly about them. So I know it's those two that really kind of got me to really want to kind of get into ELO. But yeah, so we're doing top 10 tomorrow, which is Saturday, February 11th. So yeah, I want to do these deep dives and the top 10s kind of next to each other, and this is the first one. So in this deep dive, I'm just kind of going to go through some of the history of the band and what they're known for, and just some of my thoughts maybe on what my favorite like albums are and what I think about the band total. ELO, it was formed in 1970 in Birmingham, England. The core members basically are Jeff Lynne, a guy named Roy Wood, who, as I read, they says that they did multiple instruments. I know Jeff Lynne mostly for guitar, but I think he maybe plays piano as well, and maybe they played bass. I don't know, but it sounds like Jeff Lynne and Warwood kind of did like all the instruments, except for they had a drummer named Rev Bevan, and he's been the main drummer for their whole existence, basically, of ELO. So from what I read, this kind of the band was formed with those 3, basically, was kind of the core of that band. But then Roy Wood departed the band in 1972, and so Jeff Lynne has really been the face of the band. If you think of ELO, you think of Jeff Lynne. He's really been kind of the genius mastermind behind their great music. He has been since 72. The sole leader. He arranges the music, he writes the music, and he produces all the albums. So definitely have to thank Jeff Lynne for all the great music from that time on. The band basically, at that point in 1970, their prime period basically was 1972 to 1986. So that was kind of that span was the 13, 14 years. That was ELO at their top, the most popularity, I guess you can say. Because in 1986, Jeff Lynne disbanded the band. Basically, the band broke up at that point, and the only explanation I read was that Jeff Lynne was just getting tired of playing in the band, I guess. He was just kind of bored or over playing with the band, and so decided to leave the band, basically. And that was the whole... Without Jeff Lynne, you probably couldn't have ELO. So once he left, it was gone. What can you say about the band? It's such a unique style. It's a mixture of rock music, pop music, and also some classical music thrown in, which is such a unique sound to it. And that's what I love about ELO so much when I've delved into them. Because I've always said this on my channel, I love when they put stringed instruments, even horns too, but like I always love good orchestra behind a song, behind a band. I love when the Beatles do it with, stuff like Eleanor Rigby and I'm a Walrus, and you can go down the line, Yesterday, Let It Be, whatever. I love when they I love orchestra music, really. Not to listen on its own, but I love when they combine it with either pop music or rock music or folk music or whatever you want to say. It really adds more sound to it, adds more depth to the song. I don't know. And it's so beautiful. I think violins and cellos are just really beautiful sounding when they're playing together. Anyway, so I love that sound. And so then you get ELO, which basically that's all their music is. It's kind of like pretty good rock music with the great orchestra behind it. So it's just really down my alley. It's like my favorite type of music, orchestra music mixed in with the rock. Yeah, absolutely love it. All the string instruments and everything that are in there, especially when like get the New World Record and stuff. A lot of times they'll start a song with this really great orchestra intro, and then all of a sudden it'll cut into the guitar will just cut into the song, and it'll kind of break away from the heavy orchestra music, and all of a sudden now it's a rock song. And now you got this great guitar riff going in and guitar solo, whatever, and the drums and everything. And all of a sudden it's a really cool rock song. And I just love that transition from very dramatic orchestra music to classical style music to really good rock music. So yeah, I really love that about ELO, I think. And it's such a unique sound. Like I said, I don't think I've heard another band do that pretty much. I mean, I hear, like I said, the Beatles do it every once in a while, but not every song. But ELO's like almost every song is like that. So it makes it sound like a kind of a rock opera. Like some of their albums to me was like, I feel like I'm listening to this rock opera, because when you listen to like, I'm not a big like expert at rock operas, but when I listen to like Tommy, what makes Tommy so interesting, he's got the great Who rock sound, but then you have a lot of great musical arrangements with the orchestra that go into it as well, that combine, make it something really interesting and even better than what it could have been anyway. So yeah, I love that ELO does that pretty much on all their music. Makes a really fun sound. And they're just a really good rock band though as well. Jeff Lynne on guitar, great guitar sounds. I love the guitar riffs through a lot of the songs, and instrumentally, yeah, just excellent. The drumming, keyboard, everything works well together. And then Jeff Lynne is a very good lead singer. And also the harmonies are really good on a lot of the songs, a lot of their best songs. What makes them great, I think, is they have some great harmony. So they combine some of my favorite stuff together. And why, yeah, definitely kind of become one of my favorite bands now because of that. Yeah, so they disbanded in 1986. They had a brief reunion in the early 2000s. I guess they came together, maybe made an album or did some touring or whatever. Because after they disbanded, I didn't look up Jeff Lynne to see if he did some solo work. I don't know if he did any solo work. I mostly just concentrated on the band. I did read that I think the drummer Rev Bevan like formed another group and called it like ELO 2 or something like that. And he did some touring with that band as well. But yeah, so I'm sure Jeff Lynne did. I know he does a lot of producing. Like he worked with George Harrison a lot and produced some of his albums. I'm sure he produced a lot of other people's albums, so he's big on that as well. But in 2014, which is something I didn't realize, so I was reading this, the band actually got reformed. They kind of came back together, so not pretty recent years, and renamed themselves Jeff Lynne's ELO. So a little different, I guess, in ELO, but and I'm not sure if it still has some of the core members there. Definitely have Jeff Lynne, which is the big one, and probably the drummer. I don't know if Tandy, the keyboard player, was in there. That seems to be like their main group, But yeah, so I guess they've come back together and they made some more albums. I don't know. They actually sold pretty well. In fact, the last album I think did pretty well on the charts and all that. Though I think they're not as considered as great as their 70s hits, or kind of the 70s period is like that was their golden age, is from what I'm kind of getting at when I researched them. But yeah, like I said, in 2017, they were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The four members really that got inducted was, Lynn, Wood, Bevan, and Tandy were kind of the four main ones. Interesting, Wood got in there. Wood was not in the band for very long, it doesn't seem like, but I think he helped start the band basically and create the band, so he got in there for the Hall of Fame anyways. If you know the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they get to pick and choose, because some bands, different members come in and out of the band. So the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has to really pick and choose, like, who really deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when you talk about a band, because it's not always just the same 3, 4, or 5 guys. But yeah, so obviously no higher honor. I mean, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is kind of criticized, but, in some ways it's, a big honor. Overall, they made 15 albums in the career, and they sold over 50 million records, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, a lot of records, one of the biggest record-selling bands, in fact. Like I said, no one talks about this band as much, I feel like, as, like, The Who, Led Zeppelin, Queen, Pink Floyd, Rolling Stones. You talk about them, being some of the great bands, but I feel like this band might be up there with those bands, in fact, as far as how well their albums did, chart-wise and record-wise. Did very, very well. Overall, they had 27 top 40 songs in UK, so I mean, a lot of top 40 songs there. 15 top 20 songs in the US, the Billboard like top 100 or 200 in the US. And the most interesting fact I found was that the band has the record for most Billboard Hot 100 top 40 hits without a number one single. So, like I said, they had tons of hot, top songs that made the top 40, but none of them went to number one. They didn't have that real signature song. In fact, if you think about ELO, like what is ELO's like big song? It's hard to say. They don't have that one song that I don't know that really defines them. Maybe as some other bands, though they have a lot of really good songs that, and I say a lot of underrated songs, a lot of hidden gems there. That if you go into their albums, you'll hear a lot of great stuff. They go, wow, that was never like a big radio hit, but an excellent song. I want to say "Don't Get Me Down." I think the name of the song is. What's the one that's like, "Don't get me down, Bruce. Don't get me down." Like to me, I feel like that's a song I heard on the radio the most out of any ELO song. Not my favorite though. It is a really good song. It's definitely up there for me. I feel like that was the biggest radio hit, maybe. "Evil Woman," I think, is another one that's played on the radio quite a bit that I remember growing up hearing on the oldie station. So to me, those are like the two songs I feel like on the top of my head that maybe you heard the most of. If you heard of a ELO song, it's those two songs. But besides that, yeah, like I said, I don't know if they don't have a number one hit, so they don't have that one song that really you go, oh yeah, that was a great ELO song. Though they do have great songs. Like I said, the very first album was called the Electric Light Orchestra, came out in 1971. That began their discography. Their last album just came recently from out of nowhere in 2019. Was the last album, according to what Wikipedia that I looked up, looked up what all their studio albums were. That was the last one. So they expand, like I said, mostly it's from 71 to 86, but then they recently kind of had a resurgence. Anyways, but yeah, so that's their first and last albums. Personally, like when I was listening to their albums from beginning to the end, it was interesting. Like the first, I want to say 3 or 4 albums weren't particularly that good, and mostly because they rely too heavily on the orchestra music and not enough on the rock music and the vocals and all that stuff. And so for some reason it was too dominated by orchestra music and it didn't quite work for me. There was an album I think called Face the Music, I think, and that was the first album that really kind of was like they're starting to get it, like they're starting to kind of figure out the combination of this much orchestra music and this much rock music mixed in. And that album was a decent album. I think that was the first like real decent album. But it took a couple albums really to get the formula, I think. And then after that, all the albums after that, really excellent albums. I think they really mastered it at that point. Yeah, is my feeling of all that. So I think if you want to get into ELO, I wrote down some of their top albums that did very well. Like I said, the one that really made them, a mainstream hit machine, I think, is a New World Record. It went number 6 in the UK, number 5 in the US. To me, that was like the first album that really put them over the top as one of the great bands of the 70s, and had a lot of great hits on there. Like I said, no number one hits, but a lot of really good songs on there. Then the very next album was also pretty big for them. That's Out of the Blue, which actually is the only ELO album actually I own at the moment. ELO's Out of the Blue album. This I got thanks to my friend Garrett from Sound Lab Studios. Sent me that. Anyways, it's a double album. Really great album. And from what I read, it was like their best-selling album, basically. I think if you say their 2 top albums considered by anybody, it would probably be A New World Record and Out of the Blue, which came right after each other. Those sold probably the most and had the best charts, basically, out of the US and the UK. The only 2 charts I really look at. But I think if you ask anybody, that's going to be their top 2, or that's one of those is going to be their favorite album. So definitely those are the 2 big ones to look out for. And after that, you have Discovery, went number 1 in the UK, so I mean, it was the number 1 album there, 5 in the US, so it's still very good. Has a lot of good songs in there as well. And then there's Xanadu, which it's considered part of ELO's album, but now I'm forgetting the singer already. But there's a female singer that sings Xanadu. It's like it was a hit song. for her in the 70s. And so I didn't know it was connected with ELO too, but according to Wikipedia, it's part of their studio albums. And went number 2 in the UK, number 4 in the US, so did very, very well. And then there's an album called Time, went number 1 in the UK, so another number 1 hit there for the UK. It obviously does better in the UK. I think ELO did better in the UK than it did in the US. I think album, as far as records sold and for the charting. Like I said, it went number 1 in the UK, went number 16 in the US. I think Time, if I remember right, is the album that it's all space themed, which is pretty interesting. Every song has some connection to outer space or talking about outer space, or it has kind of a sci-fi thrill to it. I really like the idea, the concept of just, I always kind of enjoy that when a band does that. They take like one idea and we're going to write all our songs over that one idea. It's kind of a unique thing to do, come up with a theme, and interesting writing process, I'm sure, trying to come up with all these songs that connect. But yeah, so Time's another decent album, I think. Then you got Secret Messages, went number 4 in the UK. Not nearly as good in the US, but another really solid album. And then the last album I think that was really good for them was Balance of Power, one of their last albums they did in the 80s, and went number 9 in the UK. Anyway, so those are some of the big ones that they did. Like I said, when I looked them up, like all their albums, like I said, from New World Record on, did really, really well. So there's a lot of good albums there to check out. Personally, my top 3 favorite albums that I listened to, number 3 was Secret Messages. Kind of, I don't know, I want to say underrated album. It's not one that people talk about as much as some of their other stuff, but I really enjoyed this. I thought it had a lot of great songs. Secret Messages, the opening track was great. Stranger, I think was my favorite song on there. The Buildings Have Eyes, really great. And there's just one really good song after another. It's just one of those solid albums where it seems like every song is good. Number 2, I have Out of the Blue. Like I said, it was one of their biggest hit albums for sure, and a lot of people's number 1. It's a double album. It almost feels like a rock opera. There's a lot of just orchestra music maybe, and not a lot of singing. And a lot of times I don't like that, but I thought it worked really well on this album. But it has a lot. Turn to Stone is probably my favorite on there. Sweet Summer Nights or something like that is really good. And Mr. Good Sky or something like that. Now I'm already forgetting the names because I didn't write them down, but there's some good stuff on there for sure. Number 1 for me is A Whole New Record. That's in my top 100 favorite albums, and every time I listen to it, I want to put it higher on my list. It has so many great songs. Tightrope, the very first song, and then Telephone Line's probably my favorite on there. It's a really, really great one, but Do Ya, Living Thing, So Fine. I mean, there's like 5 or 6 just absolute killer songs on this album, Whole New Record. So definitely recommend those 3 albums. If you haven't listened to ELO, check those 3 out, if nothing else. Like I said, if you go from the beginning, it's a little rough, the first 4 or 5 albums, and then it picks up after that. But yeah, so that's my deep dive in ELO. Hopefully, if you don't know much about them, you got a little information about them that maybe you didn't know, and hopefully you got some good recommendations from me if you want to check them out. If you haven't, like I said, some of you maybe are already big fans, you know more than I do. But anyway, so that was what I have to say about ELO. Great band. Really happy I got into them. So yeah, feel free to comment what you think about ELO. What's your favorite album or song from them? Love to read that. And just thank you to everybody watching it. Thank you for everybody who likes this video. And just thank you to all the subscribers for supporting the channel. I appreciate all of you and hope you have a good day.